The pills rattled in the orange bottle like tiny bones, each one a reminder that my life was no longer entirely my own. I held them up to the light coming through my kitchen window, watching how the afternoon sun lit the edges of each capsule. 30 days of medication. Price tag higher than most people's rent. The irony wasn't lost on me, not after spending 4 decades building one of the largest medical supply companies in New England. I'm Grace Whitmore, 72 years old, retired CEO, widow of a man who loved me quietly but deeply, mother to a daughter who barely visits unless she wants something. I've survived grief, recessions, and betrayals, but nothing prepared me for the moment when Dr. Harper looked across her desk at me, with that mix of compassion and clinical detachment, and said the words I'd always feared. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, 6 months to a year. Maybe more if treatment went well. There was no screaming, no dramatic collapse, just a cold clarity washing over me like jumping into winter water. A quiet voice inside me whispered, "Well then, this is how the story shifts." I didn't cry that day. I didn't even call my daughter Melissa. She would have asked for details I wasn't ready to share and offered concern that felt more like strategy than love. Instead, I went home, brewed a cup of tea, and sat in the living room filled with old photographs and the scent of lavender from the garden outside. The house felt quiet. Too quiet. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that makes you feel like you've already disappeared and no one noticed. Looking out the window, I saw the roses blooming in full defiance of October's chill. My late husband Henry had planted those with me one summer. They came back stronger each year, as if to remind me that beauty often grows from pain. I took the first pill without ceremony, no prayer, no toast to courage, just a decision. A small beginning. This wasn't going to be a story about dying. It was going to be a story about choosing how to live before someone else tried to choose for me. The text came at 2:17 p.m., just as I was setting the kettle down on the stove. "Hey Mom, Ethan and I were thinking we should stop by tonight. Say around 6? No emojis. No how are you feeling. Just the kind of message you send when you've already decided the answer should be yes. I typed out a reply, "Sure, see you then." I didn't ask why. I already knew. Melissa and Ethan lived 20 minutes away. They visited maybe once a month, always with a purpose. A favor to ask, a document to sign, a loan to float. The last time they came, it was because they wanted me to co-sign for a luxury sublease. Before that, they needed someone to watch their labradoodle during a week-long trip to Turks and Caicos. They never came just to talk, certainly not to listen. At 6:01, the doorbell rang. Melissa stood there in a tailored camel coat, one I vaguely remembered buying for her birthday last year. Her makeup was flawless, her hair pulled into a neat chignon that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Ethan wore a navy suit and the kind of smile he reserved for meetings with high-net-worth clients. "Hi, Mom," she said, leaning in for a quick, dry-cheeked kiss. "You look tired." I invited them into the living room. It still looked the way Henry and I had designed it: warm wood furniture, floral curtains, shelves filled with family pictures from a time when love didn't feel so conditional. Melissa and Ethan sat on the couch like polite guests, backs straight, eyes scanning the room. "We've been thinking," Melissa began, tone rehearsed. "It's probably too much for you to handle all this on your own now. The house, the bills, the medical stuff." "I'm 72, not 100, I said, keeping my voice calm. "And I've managed this house just fine." Ethan leaned forward, hands clasped. "Grace, we're just trying to make sure you're taken care of. Maybe it's time to consider other options, something like moving in with us or a retirement community. Somewhere that can support your situation." There it was, my situation, as if cancer were a misstep I'd made at a cocktail party. "And the house?" I asked. Ethan smiled. "Well, it could fetch a great price right now. We'd help with the sale, of course. I could even manage the investment strategy to maximize returns for your care." I looked at their faces, so polished, so practiced. I saw not concern, but calculation. They weren't here to help me live. They were here to arrange my exit. The house felt colder after they left. Not physically, but in the way a space shifts when someone walks through it with hidden intentions. I sat alone in the living room, watching the clock hands crawl toward midnight, wondering when my life had become a spreadsheet someone else wanted to manage. That's when the phone rang. Not my cell, the landline. I hadn't used it in weeks. Grace, the voice said, soft and uncertain. It's Daniel. Daniel Costa. I froze. Daniel. I hadn't heard that name spoken in nearly 30 years. He was once a warehouse supervisor at my company. A Portuguese immigrant who worked long hours, always with a quiet smile and a pair of eyes that saw more than I wanted to admit. After Henry passed, Daniel had been there first to offer condolences, then to carry boxes, and then to make me laugh again. We had a brief, intense relationship, no promises, just something real in a time when everything else felt like it was breaking. When his mother fell ill, he moved back to Portugal. I never saw him again. Until now. Daniel, I said, surprised by how easily his name came out. How did you find me? I never stopped looking, he said. I heard about your illness from someone who used to work at Whitmore Medical, and about your daughter, about everything. His voice wasn't judging, just knowing. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Don't be, he replied. I'm calling because you have options, Grace. You don't have to let them script the rest of your story. A pause. I live just outside Lisbon now. I run a small hospitality business. I have connections, friends in medicine. If you want out, if you want a life that's yours, I can help you, not out of pity, but because I care, still. His words landed gently but with weight, like snow on a tree that's already leaning. I don't know, I whispered. It's not that simple. There are legal issues, medical care, my house. Let me help with the details. You've spent your life taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time someone took care of you. I said nothing. But in that moment, a crack formed in the wall I didn't even know I'd built. Daniel wasn't offering escape. He was offering freedom and something even rarer. A chance to choose what the rest of my life looked like. Not because I was dying, but because I was finally ready to live. By the next morning, I wasn't thinking about whether I could do it. I was thinking about how. Daniel had lit a spark, and the more I considered the way Melissa and Ethan hovered calculating, waiting, the more that spark caught fire. I wasn't going to wait around while they arranged my decline like a boardroom transition plan. I made a list. First, the legal groundwork. I called Robert Lansing, my attorney of 15 years. Woke him up at 2 a.m. Grace, are you all right? He asked, groggy but alert. I'm fine, I said, but I need to meet, tonight. To do what? Revoke Melissa's power of attorney, rewrite my will, and set up offshore protections for my assets. There was silence. You're serious. Dead serious. 2 hours later, I walked into Robert's office carrying a folder stuffed with financial statements, medical records, and a yellow legal pad full of handwritten notes. Grace, he said carefully, I know you've been through a lot, but these are major moves. If Melissa challenges you legally— She already is, I cut in. She just hasn't filed the paperwork yet. We worked until sunrise. By the time I left, the wheels were in motion, new trusts established, accounts opened in Switzerland and Portugal, powers of attorney revoked, and my will revised to direct the bulk of my estate to elder care foundations and charities for women entrepreneurs. Melissa wouldn't see it coming, and even if she did, she wouldn't be able to touch a cent. Second, logistics. I booked a flight to Lisbon. One way. Seat 3A. I would leave in 5 days, just enough time to disappear without raising immediate suspicion. Third, cover story. Robert and I crafted a narrative to explain my absence. According to the paper trail, I was heading to an experimental treatment facility in Mexico. It was believable enough, desperate enough, and just out of reach enough to keep Melissa occupied. Fourth, closure. I stood in the kitchen that had once been my favorite room and looked around. The light still poured in just right. The roses still bloomed outside, but everything felt used up. This house had been a home, then a cage. I wouldn't sell it. Not yet. Let Melissa walk into it one day and wonder where I'd gone, wonder why I'd left without saying goodbye. She'd think I'd lost my mind. What she wouldn't realize, what I was counting on her not realizing, was that I had finally found it. Not in a hospital bed, not under her roof, but on my own terms. And in 5 days I'd be boarding a plane to prove it. The plane touched down in Lisbon at 2:47 p.m. local time. I stepped off as Grace Whitmore, but I no longer felt like the woman who had left Newport. That version of me had been exhausted, boxed in, and managed like an asset on a spreadsheet. Here I was no one, which meant I could be anyone. Daniel met me just past customs, holding a small sign with my name written in block letters. It was a simple gesture, but I felt my throat tighten. He hadn't changed much. His silver hair gave him a kind of quiet elegance. His smile, genuine and warm, still disarmed me in the best way. "You came," he said, as though he hadn't been sure until that moment. I said I would. He drove us along the coast in a black sedan, speaking softly, as if not to overwhelm me. I didn't say much. I was too busy watching the sea flicker outside the window. The cliffs, the vineyards, the tiled rooftops of a place that felt more like home than anywhere I'd been in decades. His house, our house, he called it, sat on a gentle rise in Cascais, overlooking the Atlantic. A whitewashed villa with blue shutters, trimmed with wild roses and lavender. It was the kind of house I might have dreamed of once but dismissed as too romantic, too impractical. Now it felt earned. The first night we sat on the terrace, drinking vin verde and eating fresh olives, while the sunset turned the ocean into molten gold. "I had this place built 3 years ago," Daniel said, "but I never moved in. Not really. I was waiting." "For what?" "For you?" I didn't know what to say, so I took his hand instead. It said more than words could. The following week, I met with Dr. Carvalho, one of Lisbon's top oncologists. Daniel had already arranged everything. My medical records had been transferred, appointments booked. I asked how he managed that, and he only smiled. "I've had 30 years to prepare for the day I'd see you again. You'd think I'd leave the details to chance." The hospital was modern, discreet, and shockingly affordable compared to the bills I'd been paying back in the States. The staff treated me like a person, not a prognosis. Each day brought a new rhythm: slow mornings with strong coffee, walks along the shore, gentle conversation with someone who actually listened. Daniel wasn't trying to fix me. He wasn't trying to control anything. He simply let me be. And slowly, I remembered what it was like to exist without being managed. To be seen without being evaluated. To be loved without being measured. In Portugal, I wasn't a burden. I was just grace. And for the first time in years, that was enough. 2 weeks into my quiet new life, the past came knocking. Robert called from Rhode Island, his voice tight. "Melissa's filed a petition," he said. "She's asking the court to declare you mentally incompetent." I didn't flinch. "She's claiming your recent financial decisions are evidence of cognitive decline," he continued. "The transfers, the offshore accounts, the revoked power of attorney. She's presenting it all as a sign that you've been manipulated or confused." "By whom?" I asked calmly. "Daniel, presumably. Or me. Or the cancer. Doesn't matter. She's spinning the narrative that you're no longer capable of rational judgment and need guardianship." I leaned back in the terrace chair, the sea breeze playing with my hair. "And what does the judge think?" "The court wants to hear from you. In writing or remotely. If we can show that you made these decisions with full understanding, the petition falls apart. But if she pushes harder, she could try to override everything." That's when I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power. Melissa had lost control, and now she was going to war to get it back. I didn't panic. I planned. I hired a private investigator in Boston who specialized in elder exploitation. Every text, every call, every suggestion Melissa and Ethan had made in the months leading up to my departure, manipulative, pressuring, dismissive, was documented and preserved. Then I brought in a forensic accountant. Over the years, I'd given Melissa more than $500,000. The graduate school tuition, the Vermont vacation home, the interest-free loans that somehow turned into gifts. I wanted a full report: where the money went, what it was used for, and what had been promised in return. Next, I called PR Consultant 1, who handled high-profile elder abuse cases. If Melissa wanted to make this public, I was going to make sure she understood the weight of that choice. The narrative wasn't going to be a confused old woman mismanaging her money. It was going to be about a mother fighting back. A week later, I received word that Melissa had flown to Portugal. Her investigator had traced my name to a wellness clinic north of Porto, a facility known for treating wealthy American patients with unconventional therapies. I smiled. Daniel had fed that information to the right people at just the right time. The clinic was real, but it was also a high-security psychiatric center. The reports came in quickly. Melissa and Ethan showed up, demanded to see me, and refused to leave when told I wasn't there. She accused the staff of lying, of hiding me, of colluding in some international conspiracy. Security was called. The police followed. Melissa left with a formal trespass warning and a note in her file. Unstable behavior, highly agitated, possibly delusional. She wanted me declared unfit? She had just made the strongest argument for her own instability. As I watched the waves roll in that evening, I sipped wine beside Daniel and smiled to myself. Melissa had thrown the first punch. But I had already planned the knockout. She showed up at my gate 2 days later. Melissa stood there in a linen blouse, eyes puffy from jet lag, and something else, rage or disbelief. Ethan hovered behind her, silent, no longer wearing the smug assurance of a man in control. They stared at the villa, then at me, like they couldn't quite believe I was real. "Mom," Melissa said, "you look different." "I feel different," I replied. "Come in." Daniel greeted them in the living room with a calm that only made Ethan more uncomfortable. The space was filled with soft music, fresh flowers, and the sea breeze drifting through the open windows. It wasn't the setting they expected. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a sanctuary. Melissa sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. "We were worried sick. No one knew where you were. The clinic said you'd never been there. The police were involved." "That must have been stressful," I said, pouring tea without invitation. She blinked. "You don't seem upset." "Why would I be upset?" I said, sitting opposite her. "You came looking for a helpless woman lost in her illness. Instead, you found a mother who doesn't need saving." Her face flushed. "You've moved money, cut us out of decisions, hidden your condition." "I've protected myself," I interrupted. "There's a difference." Ethan leaned forward. "Grace, let's be reasonable. You're still in treatment. These kinds of changes, legal, financial, they raise questions." "What kind of questions?" I asked. "The kind that justify trying to take over my estate? The kind that turn my diagnosis into your opportunity?" Melissa stood. "We just wanted to help you." "No, you wanted to manage me," I said, my voice steady. "Like a trust fund or a tax shelter. You didn't ask what I wanted. You made assumptions based on what was easiest for you." There was a long pause. Then I dropped the final card. "I sold Whitmore Medical for $8.2 million $3 months ago." Melissa's mouth fell open. "And every dollar," I continued, "is secured in accounts you will never access. The will has changed. The power of attorney is revoked. If anything happens to me, it goes to organizations that help protect women from the kind of manipulation I've just lived through." Ethan spoke, almost a whisper. "You can't do that." "I already have." Melissa's voice cracked. "But we're your family." "No," I said gently, "Daniel is family. My doctor here, my lawyer, people who see me as a human being, not a transaction. I raised you with love, Melissa. But somewhere along the way you learned to value control over connection." She sank back into the couch, silent. The fight had drained from her. "I'm not angry," I said, standing, "but I am done. Done pretending, done excusing, done funding." I walked them to the door. As Melissa stepped outside, she looked back, eyes wet. "I did love you, Mom." "Maybe," I said. "But love without respect is just another word for control." I closed the door behind her. Not with anger, but with certainty. And silence never felt so peaceful. 6 months later, I woke to the sound of seabirds and the scent of fresh coffee drifting in from the kitchen. Daniel was humming barefoot on the tile, reading the Portuguese news, and pretending not to worry about my blood work appointment that afternoon. My cancer was in remission. Dr. Carvalho said it was rare, nothing short of remarkable. But I didn't need him to explain why. I had chosen to live. Not just biologically, but fully, with intention, with joy, with boundaries. I had walked away from the version of myself that measured worth in sacrifice and silence. Now, I measured it in mornings like this. My days were filled with purpose. Daniel and I had begun building a small program for medical travelers, Americans, mostly who sought not just treatment but dignity. We partnered with local doctors, therapists, and care homes. I called it Haven Grace. A quiet, intentional name. Just like me. Back in Rhode Island, things were less graceful. Melissa and Ethan had divorced shortly after returning to the States. Between the legal bills, public embarrassment, and shattered reputations, they'd become cautionary tales among their peers. Robert kept me informed, though I rarely asked. Once he offered to send over court updates. I declined. I didn't need revenge. Justice had been enough. One letter did come from Melissa, a handwritten note, shaky and unsteady. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask for money. She simply wrote, "I didn't know who you really were until you left. Maybe I never wanted to." I didn't reply. Some chapters don't deserve sequels. Instead, I folded the letter and placed it in a box marked lessons, then returned to the garden where Daniel was trimming roses he had planted in my honor. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," I replied. "About the past?" "No, about how lucky I am to still have a future." We sat together on the terrace as the sun rose, casting light over the sea, over our hands intertwined, over a life not stolen, but reclaimed. Some stories end in forgiveness. Mine didn't need to. It ended in freedom. And in the soft certainty that I had chosen my ending well and lived my truth out loud.